Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome again. This is Dr. Tom Neal. It's so good to be with you on another episode of Sharing the Faith. This is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee and an opportunity for me to share in the work of evangelization, which is the mission of the church as a whole, of our local church. And I love doing that by sharing with you people I know who are, in my judgment, great witnesses to the faith, people who have, in very different ways, given testimony to the beauty of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And today, I have another dear friend of mine from the New Orleans area who has agreed to come on, Matthew Estrade. Matthew, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to have you. And Matthew and I met a number of years ago, and actually the connection that I think we've discerned we had, what originally brought us together was the question of dementia, which both my mother and my father had, and I'll mention that more in a few moments. And as I'll read him in his biography a bit, Matthew works with people who have dementia and Alzheimer's. That's kind of an area of passion and dedication in his own professional and personal life. So I'd like to just read your bio here, Matthew, just so people get a sense of you before we jump into the material here. So Matthew Estrade is the founder of Catholic Aging, educating and accompanying families on the aging journey with a focus on Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. In 2019, he published the Peace With Dementia Rosary, Education, Intentions, Community. Matthew then started writing blog articles and recording a video podcast to expand the book's content and scope. He also offers training to clergy and laity to better understand and support aging in their parishes and dioceses. Matthew has been a caregiver support group facilitator for 9 years with over 400 sessions. He is a coach on virtual clinic platform mycatholicdoctor.com, guiding families in assessing their unique caregiving situation and creating next steps. Matthew graduated from Jesuit High School in New Orleans and went on to earn degrees at Auburn University, University of New Orleans, and a master's in gerontology at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. Matthew is married and has 3 children. So again, great to have you, Matthew. Now, our story, as I said, began, just to mention briefly, my own mother and father both had dementia. My father died a little over a year before my mother. In 2018, he died, my mom in 2019, both from complications related to their dementia decline. So that was a really big part of my own life. It was new for me in many ways. My grandparents had Alzheimer's, but that was more distant because I was gone and away from them at the time. So it was more like hearing about it. But with my dad, but especially my mom, who lived with us down in New Orleans, it was an up close and personal experience. So Matthew and I connected over that, and Matthew introduced me to his own kind of Catholic wisdom in this area. So what I'd like to do today, Matthew, is draw on your wisdom and knowledge and experience and ask you, first of all, to talk a little bit about dementia itself and maybe your own journey into this world, kind of a beautiful story of your own. And then we can get more into the Catholic nature of the way you approach it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so starting with my journey briefly is with one of my grandparents, just like you mentioned, in the 90s. I was wrapping up high school in 1995. Went off to Auburn, and sort of in that time, my mother sat me and my brothers down and said, "Look, your Grandpa Milton, he's forgetting things, and he's been diagnosed with a type of dementia. They didn't know really what, but they knew there was some memory impairment, there was confusion, there was, walking, just leaving the house for no reason." And so that's sort of like, I will never forget that moment. And at the same time, we weren't able to do anything because not long after that, my twin brother and I went off to school, but we would keep up and hear how things went. But while we were here, I do remember my mom, who was working, my dad was working, and they would, I just remember there was a lot of things that were happening where mom would have to, leave work early, go take care of things, or she wasn't home that night till late because she was having to take care of things. So My grandfather never moved in with us. He was a veteran, so he had access to some of the facilities that were open at that time. But from seeing my mom's perspective, I got a sense of how difficult it was and how hard she was working, and how this is a family disease. One person has it, but it really is something that impacts the family, and especially the parents. Parents, they're raising sometimes younger children when their parents develop some type of dementia. But thank goodness most people will not develop dementia. It's about when you look at statistics over the age 65, it's about 1 in 9.
Okay.
And then when you get to around 85 years old, it could be 1 in 2. So it could be 50% of people. And it really is age is your greatest risk factor. But as we get older, there will be some normal forgetting of things and slowing down of processing, but it's definitely not something normal. And you asked about dementia and Alzheimer's. So you can think about dementia as this broad umbrella term that kind of catches a lot of different symptoms. And Alzheimer's disease is just one particular disease that causes some or most of those symptoms. So a sample of those symptoms of dementia are, of course, memory impairment. I think that's what we think of. We think of first. Forgetting things. It's forgetting names. It's forgetting things that you used to be able to do very well. It's forgetting. Not being able to the point. I would say to the point where you're not able to continue to work, or continue to do your ministry, or continue to do your retirement plans. So we will all, to some extent, even me, who's not even 50 yet, but close, will forget stuff. But that's, a lot of that can be normal. A lot of that is normal, trying to multitask, but not doing it effectively, yes. Or just having a lot of things going on. So it's when people are, where they're not able to do these things, it's sort of disrupting their normal life. And it often shows up with things like not paying bills on time, like they start stacking up. The electricity might even go out if it's someone living alone, not being able to cook for themselves, forgetting how to run the washing machine, and all these real things that are very familiar, but also have a lot of steps to them. We start to forget how to do those things. So that's just a really brief overview of the warning signs that people can have. And I don't know did you want me to go? So Alzheimer's disease is one different type. Did you want me to preview a couple of other ones?
Would you do that? Yeah, just get a broader picture for people of what this means.
Yeah. So Alzheimer's disease, we think, causes between 60 and 80% of dementia, of the dementia symptoms. So that it still leaves a good handful of other diseases. So vascular type dementia is one, where you have someone have heart issues, blood flow issues to the brain. There is some memory to that, but it's others. It could be other symptoms as well. Lewy body type dementia is one that these are different types of plaques and proteins on the brain, different presentation than Alzheimer's. If you were to look at the brain, Lewy body dementia is what we believe Robin Williams had, and he suffered with hallucinations like paranoia, restless leg syndrome. He had a lot of things going on that eventually led him to take his life, and he probably didn't realize he was doing it, and it was distressful, as distressful as can be. So that's Lewy body type dementia. Vascular dementia is the last one I'll mention. This one is interesting because it impacts older adults, and I'll say before age 65. And to the point where someone may be presenting different behavioral things, like they're just acting strange. They're not acting like prim and proper as they might used to, or they might be doing some things that are just abnormal, like they just start drinking, could be an example, gambling. So they're not able to sort of have a filter, so to speak. And this one is, so it's more of like a behavioral type thing. But you also have a variant that it attacks language. To bring up another actor, Bruce Williams has a very public, persona now, or awareness of PPA, primary progressive aphasia. So his challenge is not the behavioral part, very visible. It's the language. It's being able to find the right words in a really consistent way where it's disrupting the way that he would normally communicate like we are. So those are 4 or 5 of the most common types of dementia.
Well, that's very, very helpful. And one thing you mentioned early on, Matthew, that I personally experienced, and other people I know who've dealt with a dementia, is the family kind of character of dementia. It's not just the person themselves. It affects the entire family, loved ones, spouses, and maybe in a particularly intense way. And I, for example, I was just talking to someone recently about the difficulty of someone in the family, whether it's a spouse or a child, confronting the person who has dementia with the fact that they have dementia, and that being very difficult for those people to kind of internalize or accept. And so maybe just a little bit about your experience with the family dimensions of dementia.
Yeah, so you brought up a very specific, very common challenge, and that's approaching the person when you're starting to see some of these warning signs. These red flags are going off in the caregiver's mind, and rightfully so, they need to address them. But of course, with a lot of charity, and when it might be so stressful, it's hard to do that because some people jump into that safety mode. So it's interesting because I believe, like in my experience, people who are developing dementia, these things are happening and they're compensating for them. They're writing extra notes, or they're writing instructions, or they're doing some things where they can sort of not make it as noticeable. But there are also there are some people, I think a lot of people know that something is happening. They may not know it's dementia, but something's happening. And there are some people who will go into a denial, and then there are some people who actually just have a lack of insight. So someone, of course, could feel this coming on, or this happening in a very slow way, because dementia does progress very slowly. If it happens quickly, it's likely something else, an infection, or some other things. We can go into that if there's time. But so there can be some denial and some fear, but there also can be some lack of insight of the part of their brain that is changing and is becoming, slowly becoming damaged, is the part of the brain that would actually give them the realization that, yes, that they're not able to do things as they used to a point where it's disrupting their life, and being able to do the things that they normally and want to do. So it's kind of a balance of family caregivers recognizing that, like, well, is dad in denial? He knows what's going on, and it's like just a way of kind of being real charitable and saying, I'm here to support you, and so kind of going that route. Or is it a lack of insight where it's his dad's brain that is causing him to not do that? And whichever the case, it is done with charity, and it's done with I think a lot of prayer and talking with other siblings, if you can get them on board as well. The biggest things are addressing the safety issues first, driving, sharp objects, things like that, which I want to be sure to say that even when somebody starts showing these signs, or even gets a probable diagnosis from a clinician, it's definitely not time to start. It's not, let's take the keys away now, or let's take away you have to quit your job, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of fear behind a probable diagnosis because of what might come of that, when in reality, we really just need to work with that individual person, the abilities that they still have, and kind of see how do we make this transition whenever it's a slow progression as the disease progresses.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's so many kind of pathways I'd love to explore about dementia itself, but I really do want to get to the question of your own Catholic faith as a gerontologist and as a man who walked, with your grandfather, has influenced or, impacted the way that you approach this, your work with people, your thought about the science itself, and just about the meaning of human aging and suffering and things like that. So maybe just a few thoughts on how you have allowed your faith to shape your work as a gerontologist.
Yeah. So around 2015, I started leading a support group at our Council on Aging. So just local nonprofit, secular organization funded by the parish and the state. The same one that you mentioned in the introduction. So I've been doing that for 9 years. And around 2015, as I started it and people started finding out about it, more people were coming. And then in their introduction, or just kind of in their story that would unfold, they would say, I go to St. Peter Parish, or I go to Our Lady of the Lake, or Mary Queen of Peace. So I started over a period of months. This started, they were planting seeds. They didn't realize it, but they were planting seeds in my mind to say, well, what does the Catholic Church say about disease, about dementia? Is there a patron saint of dementia? Is there one of caregiving? So, and I was a practicing Catholic, but I was not very serious about my faith. And I started looking into things. I found Saint Dymphna, who is our patron saint of mental illness, of brain disorders, of depression, anxiety, a whole number of things. But she's our patron saint, and her feast day is May 15th. So then, and then not long after that, Saint John the Evangelist, he's the patron saint of caregivers, which of course Jesus entrusted her, Our Lady, into his care as he was on the cross. So, and his feast day is on December 27th. So it started, really like these saints started finding me, I think, and then started to say, okay, what does, as a whole, what is the Catholic Church? What has been written about it? What have other authors, laity, what have they written about it? So I started doing some research to give Catholics some resources to say, here's a book on dementia, but also brings in faith. And there were a handful of books. The ones that I did find were not quite, they were good, but they weren't quite what I wanted to do. And around 2017, I started praying a rosary. And usually, when someone just starts saying a rosary, it's usually because there's a challenge. And for me, it was graduate school. I was in the last year of grad school, was going to write my thesis for the master's in gerontology. And I picked up a rosary. And so all these saints were coming, popping up. I was praying the rosary. So I started thinking about, well, what if there was an introduction to dementia, and what if it brought in prayers of the rosary and support and peace? So that's sort of how the book came about. And I self-published that in 2019. And after that, I was just, you're a writer. So I was in writing mode. I just, from the thesis and then the book, and then started writing the blog and doing the podcast. All these things just kind of slowly over time.
Yes. And you wrote the book. Before you wrote the book, did you practice this with others and kind of share this devotional practice of relating dementia care and so forth with rosary devotion? Or is it really just your own that you ended up putting in the book and then sharing it out? Just curious how that went.
Yeah, it was mostly on my own. There were a handful of people that knew about it, especially in the medical field, some nurses and physicians. And so I would share my drafts and see what they thought about it, and, see if am I missing anything pretty, really basic, on the journey on there. So they give me feedback, and, that was, of course, very helpful. And so in the book, when I say, am I missing anything on the journey, we start from, we take it sort of as a timeline, although we don't have any times or dates in there because it's different for everybody. We start with the first mini chapter, which involves the Annunciation. We talk about the diagnosis or probable diagnosis. It goes all the way to the person passing, goes into a little bit about prevention, goes into what does the caregiver do now that they're no longer an active caregiver. They've had this challenging but wonderful experience. And there's a lot to unpack after that too. So that involves, continuing to learn. Some people continue to learn about dementia and figure out, how did I do? Some start to teach and volunteer in the field too. So kind of, the spectrum. So
how would give a sense, because I would love people to be able to get this book and be inspired to get this book. What way does it work in terms of the devotion, and what kind of service do you think it provides, especially for caregivers?
Yeah, so it's there are 20 mini chapters, so it's very brief. So with illustration, lots of paintings, so a lot of devotional images that people can meditate on, and what I tried to do in those 20 mini chapters was to take a mystery, and then so we have some artwork on the left side of the book, on the left page, then some paragraphs about some particular stage. And stage is really not the right word, because there are stages of the conditions, but just sort of like a situation. I mentioned the diagnosis or probable diagnosis. So I take that as an opportunity to talk about how, you may see these warning signs, and it may be scary to even want to make that appointment or even get your loved one to that appointment. But it's an opportunity to put your trust in God. And
Yes.
these are the reasons. So there's the trust in God, but there's also the real, I guess visible, I'll say, because all of it's real, but the visible benefits of going to get an early diagnosis or get a checkup, because there's lots of things you can do. Once you catch it early, you may not be able to do anything disease-wise, cure-wise, but there's a lot of things that can be done to sort of like help you on the on the whole path. So we tie that in with the mystery, and at the end there's a brief prayer for everybody involved. It could be the physician, it's always the family, the person living with dementia. So some dementia education and some information that people can put into practice, and then a prayer with the artwork.
I've shared that book with a number of people over the years that have family members who have dementia, and it has really been to great effect. I just want to tell you that people have really appreciated that.
Praise be to God.
In one particular case, a person about a year and a half ago I gave it to, whose husband had it. She said that, praying with that quietly, she never shared with him that she was doing it because she thought it would upset him.
Yeah.
Just because of the way the whole dynamic worked there. But for her, it was kind of this quiet walking with the saints, with Mary, with Jesus, especially, through her own husband's journey. And so, yeah, it was very, very comforting. I want to step out of this just for a moment and thinking about the rosary, because one of the things the rosary is about is remembering the mysteries of salvation, all the important elements of our identity as Catholic Christians is rooted in history and is rooted in the memory of what God has done for us. And one of obviously the essential characteristics of dementia, Alzheimer's, and the other forms of dementia is the loss of memory. And with the loss of memory can come the loss of a sense of identity. Like for the person themselves, who am I? I don't have continuity of memory anymore. I lose the sense of relationships, the things I was accustomed to doing, the independence I had, or the people who are, loved ones of the person with dementia don't recognize them anymore, right? Because maybe their anger outbursts, maybe they say things they never said before. Maybe a daughter comes to see her father and he doesn't know who she is, So that whole idea of loss of memories and loss of identity, but yet knowing that every human being retains their dignity and who they are no matter what. Maybe just a few words on your experience of that journey for people, which I found very challenging, and I know so many others have.
Yeah, so I know we mentioned dignity in the book, but over the last 5 years since the book has been out, it's really been an important theme for the ministry as a whole, because we want people, as challenging as it is, as you would think, but also like even medically challenging. Like there are reasons why it's challenging for us to look at our loved one and perhaps see them as they were, as our parent, as our spouse. So there's a lot of things kind of working there. We've done our best to explain dignity, explain worth, even though they may not be working, or even, doing the things that they wanted to do and traveling and everything, or they may not be able to be a very active grandparent like some parents are, sitting,
Yes.
Watching and changing diapers and all that kind of stuff. But, while they're not a productive in the eyes of the world or as they used to be, we do our best to really explain how the dignity that's there and how special it is just to be there with them. Because for a lot of people, especially if they're in their beds, and that's really, really at the late stages of it. So I don't want people to think that dementia is just that. It's that opportunity to be there and an opportunity to be there with them, but also it's that opportunity for you to sit with them. I was reading something recently from St. John Paul II. In 1999, he wrote a letter to the elderly. And in that, it was beautiful how he talked about how spending time for spending time with that person. You think that you are doing a great thing, which you are. You're expressing charity as a corporal work of mercy to visit the sick and our loved ones. But it's important to realize what they're doing for you at that moment. And it's just something very beautiful. We've tried to explain, which it's so large. We'll continue to try to spread that, to give people hope, right? Because someone could look at their situation, and this is, I don't recognize my dad as he was, but help them pivot, I guess. And because the world's not going to give them that guidance to pivot. And we're hoping to do that with individuals that come to the site, with parishes that we're able to visit, with priests that we're able to talk to. So yeah, it's a really special thing to be able to continue to explore that topic of dignity.
No, that's so excellent. And you just mentioned, I'm glad you did, because I wanted to talk about your work in parishes and dioceses, encouraging development of support systems, ministries, awareness, and so on. What kinds of things would you do? What kind of things would you encourage parishes to do to make kind of a supportive network in a parish for people who are suffering with this?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so it's interesting. We tend to put a lot of time and effort into youth ministry and catechesis and everything. We should continue to do that. So if I had like just 20 seconds, I would say we want to try to do that for our older adults too. And for very, very obvious reasons, they're as important as our youth are. But we don't want to take them for granted, saying like, oh, okay, well, they've grown up in the faith and they're here and they're coming to Mass, or maybe they're not coming to Mass, or maybe they don't have access to the sacraments. But we want to make sure, we want to keep a keen focus on our older adults, because we want to make sure that they feel loved, that they're not isolated. Yeah. We want them to continue to feel the fullness of the church and the parish community till the very end. Not only for them to feel good and to feel loved, but also I feel like in a way we're protecting their faith, because it would be very easy for someone to become isolated, to be depressed in their home and just stay there and just say, why did God do this to me? And if our parish is not there, if our ministries, if our priests are not there to talk about what the stage of life is like, and how this is actually this is more opportunity to dive into our rich history and tradition, and that the church is there to support us, then we could possibly lose people right before the end. And we want everyone to die in a state of grace with faith, hope, and charity, and keep their faith strong. So I think that we help them to feel good by not being isolated, but also we want to help keep them support their faith journey till the very end.
So you yourself do this work by going to parishes or dioceses to offer training. Describe maybe what you yourself could bring to help, establish an awareness, and then maybe programmatic ways of thinking about how to do this.
Yeah. So in the programming and sort of how do we do this? How do we do what I just described? It's, equipping our priests, our deacons, our religious, our laity to create support groups, to provide education to others. So I've done parish missions, parish talks, simply about what is dementia, because I take for granted sometimes that people know that there's dementia it could be several different types of diseases. So there's a lot I take for granted that, and this is basic education that everybody needs, and the parishes can be wonderful vehicles as we tie in faith formation. So the basics of dementia, the basics of caregiving. So that can be talks. That can be I can assist in parishes and starting support groups with the laity, and these are laity that don't even have medical experience. So especially if someone's been a caregiver before, they know dementia, they know caregiving, and with the scripts that I can provide and the talks that I come in and do, these are things that they can sort of take with them with our support too. It's not just, hey, here, start a support group. It's how do we support you along the way with different quotes and verses and agenda, and what kind of education do you want to offer this week? This month at this support group, or how do we support people in creating the programs? Or do we already have a visiting of the sick program with Eucharistic ministers and many, and that's sometimes a really good foundation and place to start, is that this parish visits the sick and the homebound. And they go visit hospitals. So a lot have that. So that I feel like if a parish has that, it's something to really build on and to expand into those who are not in hospitals, who are not isolated, because you also have those caregivers, remember, that are going to be actively, taking care of a loved one.
Of course. And to that end, if people are interested in contacting you for doing this kind of training workshop, is it www.catholicaging.com? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great place to go. There's a contact information. I'm pretty easy to find as well as if they Google me, email addresses and whatnot. But a good hub is catholicaging.com, because they can reach out to me. They can find a lot of the blog articles and videos, and then I get the book there as well.
Excellent. I'm thrilled, by the way, to get this out there in a new way, because I so believe not only in you and my friendship with you and seeing the work you've done, but just in general that in parish ministries, this often, as you said, we rightfully emphasize the youth and educating the youth and providing ministry and support to them. But so often the older members of our congregations, especially those who are, infirm or whatever, homebound and so on, can fall out of the support networks, and we forget about them because they're not necessarily advocating for themselves unless someone else does. So, and I've also find, by my experience, and I'd love you to comment on this, that in my experience, people who have been through this journey, so say with a spouse or a parent or whatever it would be, after that person passes away, dies, they want to do something. They feel a sense of mission. Like, I've been through this. I want others to be able to, so sometimes those people in parishes can be the very people who could take leadership because they get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most people want a mentor. They want to remember that experience, and they want to turn it into something very positive that's going to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last part of the podcast here, I'd like to ask you, Matthew, I know you said you have for 9 years you facilitated sessions, group facilitator for support groups for caregivers, and over 400 sessions. So maybe any anecdotes you want to share from that, or wisdom, or what have you learned from all those years? What things stand out to you? Maybe things that really move the heart.
One particular caregiver of the hundreds stands out. His name's Joe. He was taking care of his wife who had Alzheimer's. He was Catholic. He was one of the Catholics that would come to the group, and he was not afraid to talk about his faith. And he was being genuine in his witness, and by doing so, he inspired everybody in the group. Talking about how, this is really hard, but I've realized that in my age that this is my ministry. Like, you can do an active ministry at your parish or in the diocese, but he's like, this is my ministry here at home, is to take care of my wife of over 50 years, and to just kind of take the suffering as it comes, offer it up to God, and really be that face of Christ to my wife. And when he said that, he softened the heart of one or two people. We had more people in there, but there were one or two people especially who were just had this hardened heart, or just had this bitterness, which can be understandable, right, on the caregiver journey. Like, they just melted. And it was just amazing to see how he did that. And I see it in other ways in, almost every session. There's something that is very inspirational, not for me as the facilitator. I'm there to kind of, I'll say some things, but a lot of it's kind of keeping the conversation going, providing some education, busting some myths, things like that, bringing in experience from other caregivers that I've learned. So in every support group, there's at least one way that a caregiver is inspiring the others. And there's at least one time where everybody's in stitches laughing about something ridiculous or something funny that they did, that they goofed on, or their loved one did. So, support groups are just, whether I help create or facilitate or, help you start one in the parish, I encourage you to think about, how special they are, because they bring fellowship, they bring education, they bring a shared experience that, that Christ will accompany us on.
Yes, I love that you mentioned, the moments of laughter that can come. I mean, so many times with people who journey with that dementia themselves or with loved ones, there are a lot of tears. There's a lot of sadness. There can be bitterness, anger, kind of understandable questions that why me, why my friend, spouse, and so on. Mm-hmm. But there are also moments of humor that can break in. And that's such an important part of human life. And it's very healing to be able to laugh, appropriately, not, in an obviously mean-spirited way. But I remember my mom, as her dementia progressed over the years, the earlier parts of it were just, constant forgetting of, she'd tell the same story over and over again, or, she would ask me the same question, or my children the same question, or other people the same question. And one time she asked the same question, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. She'd already asked it in a single time. We had been together for maybe an hour. And I, learned to answer it each time, and then one of the times she said, did I ask that question already? And I said, yeah, you did, but that's okay. She said, the good part of that is that everything in life now is a surprise.
Yes.
Because I've never heard any of it before.
That's right.
And we laughed so hard. I'll never forget that. It was a beautiful experience. But then there's another experience where one of my siblings encountered my mom, and she didn't recognize them. And once she realized who they were after a conversation of, nice to meet you, what's your name? And then when she finally realized who it was, just how humiliating that can be, right? Mm-hmm. How awful that can make someone feel, and how, important it is for the people around them, regardless of their own feelings, to be able to step out and make sure that that person doesn't see that that's not them, right? Mm-hmm. That's not their fault. It's not because they don't love this person. It's not something they can control. And so, just maybe even the art of how to care for and love the person is a learned art. It's not obvious what you do. So that's why I appreciate so much what you do, because it helps people receive wisdom on how to deal with these things in a way that's helpful and healing and not destructive.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor to have this to have this career.
Yeah, it is. You deal with the people in their most fragile points of life. So maybe just as we move towards the end here in the next 5 minutes or so, is there anything else you'd like to say about dementia that I haven't kind of asked a question to lead you there? Dementia itself, or just caregiving and whatever else that might be helpful to our listeners?
Yeah, 2 things I thought about mentioning in the interview is, so Father Michael Champagne, who is very active at Notre Dame Seminary, who you know. Yes, actually, you introduced me to Father Champagne in the dining hall when I was there to interview you. So I did interview him eventually.
Excellent.
In the courtyard. And it was beautiful. And I mentioned that to encourage people to go to the YouTube channel that they can access easier through CatholicAging.com, because we have a number of vignettes from him. We don't have the whole one because we have some technical issues, but we have some vignettes of Father Champagne talking about his ministry to the sick, and his own experience with his mother and father. His mother had dementia, so he talks about interactions there. He talks about his father, who was this wonderful caregiver. Just you'll have to listen to it just to hear how special it is. And then he talks directly to priests and to parishes and talks about how important it is for us to address this, to be with our elderly. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because it's just beautiful. Something you mentioned, made me think about that. The idea of the parent or the spouse no longer recognizing, he addresses that beautifully. And then the other thing is that on May 15th this year, on the Feast of St. Dymphna, I published a Spanish translation of the Peace With Dementia Rosary. So this has been 12 months in the making, and Father Jose Lavastida, who's here in New Orleans as a pastor, he helped with it. He wrote a foreword for the Spanish version, and we had some wonderful translators in Baton Rouge that helped out with it. So it's finally come together. Right now, it's a PDF download with plans to be a paperback, just like the English version. So people can visit our website for that too if they're looking for the Spanish-speaking version.
Outstanding. I just have to say about Father Champagne, you know him, so you'll understand. Anyone who has not met Father Champagne is really missing out. I like to say that meeting Father Champagne is not an experience; it's an event.
Yeah,
it is an extraordinary experience. He's with the community of Jesus Crucified in Lafayette, Louisiana, which is really a beautiful lay community with priests and religious priests and sisters in the community there. And he and his community work a lot with elderly, especially elderly who are very poor or in very difficult situations, and providing not only assistance to them materially, but just providing love and care, spiritual support. So this is what they do for a mission and a living. So it's extraordinary. Okay, just to wrap it up here, I'm so grateful, Matthew, for you introducing. This is just a taste of the world that you work in all the time. And I'm grateful that you've given our listeners a chance to hear that. And most of all, that they get to know you now and can access more of the resources you have at your website, which is, again, would you say it?
CatholicAging.com.
Excellent. Catholic Aging. And there's a whole treasure trove of information on there, including the Spanish PDF. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's been a great pleasure, and blessings on you and your family, your wife, your children, and your work, your ministry, all that you do. It's just great to see your face again. It's been a while since we've done this. So thank you so much for being with us today, Matthew.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a blessing.
Wonderful. Would you take us out with prayer, please? And just lead us in a prayer I know that is part of your own Peace with Dementia Rosary.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to take this prayer from one that we wrote here in the ministry for this prayer card. This has our intercessors, got St. John the Evangelist. We have St. Dymphna. Actually, it's the painting behind me as well. And we have St. Raphael, the Archangel, and of course, Our Lady. So there are a number of prayers on the back of here. So that's where I'm going to be taking this one from. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Blessed Virgin Mary, Holy Mother of God, mediatrix of all graces, assist me in all necessities on this journey. Help me to remain at the foot of the cross and to just be, as you consoled Jesus with your presence. He knew you were there with him, and that gave him peace, even though you could not hold him. Allow me to just be with my loved one with dementia, for they will know that I am here. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Very beautiful. Thank you. What a perfect way to end, commending all this to Our Lady. Well, thank you again for being with us. This has been another episode of Sharing the Faith. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. This is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee in the service of evangelization. I hope you can join us again in 2 weeks for another episode, and may the Lord bless you between now and then.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.